Well, a time-honored way of growing in faith is through a testimony, either a testimony by someone on their particular faith journey or about them and the faith that they've displayed. And so I wanted to read this morning 3 different testimonies of 3 different soldiers who displayed their faith in various ways. I hope that each of them in their varied ways are a blessing this morning. The first of those soldiers is one that perhaps is a little bit more familiar. He's a soldier we hear about in Scripture. The Gospels of Luke and Matthew, both accounts of Jesus' life, tell of a soldier who comes to Jesus. And this particular one is found in Matthew, the 8th chapter. When Jesus entered the city of Capernaum, a centurion, a Roman soldier, came to him, appealing to Jesus and saying, "Lord, my servant is lying at home paralyzed in terrible distress." And Jesus said to him, "I will come and cure him." The centurion answered, "Lord, I am not worthy to have you come under my roof, but only speak the word, and my servant will be healed. For I am also a man under authority, with soldiers under me, and I say to one, 'Go,' and he goes, and to another, 'Come,' and he comes, and to my slave, 'Do this,' and the slave does it." When Jesus heard him, he was amazed and said to those who followed him, "Truly I tell you, in no one in Israel have I found such faith. I tell you, many will come from east and west and will eat with Abraham and Isaac and Jacob in the kingdom of heaven, while the heirs of the kingdom will be thrown into the outer darkness, while there will be weeping and gnashing of teeth." And to the centurion, Jesus said, "Go, let it be done for you according to your faith." And the servant was healed in that hour. The second 2 testimonies I want to read are from this excellent book called War Letters. And as you might suspect, it is in fact a collection of letters written by soldiers back to those at home. In their letters, we find the whole range of human experience and emotion, fear, sacrifice, and certainly faith, and have chosen 2 of those letters that display that faith. The first of them is by a man named Aaron Stevens. And let me introduce Aaron's letter in this way. Fierce debates over the issue of slavery had imperiled the creation of the American colonies from their earliest days. Delegates to the Second Continental Congress refused to sign the Declaration of Independence until severe anti-slavery language written by Thomas Jefferson, ironically a slave owner himself, was expunged. Instances of anti-slavery violence took place in the 1830s, 40s, and 50s, and some, like Aaron Dwight Stevens, were literally praying for anti-slavery violence on a national scale. A veteran of the Mexican War, Stevens was a skilled soldier who wanted to use his military expertise to hasten slavery's demise. Stephen joined forces with John Brown, a man who was equally as impassioned about eradicating slavery through violence. On October 16, 1859, Brown, Stevens, and 17 other men, including 5 blacks and 12 whites, seized the federal armory in Harpers Ferry, Virginia, now West Virginia, in an attempt to rally the local slaves in a rebellion that Brown anticipated would spread throughout the South. The raid was a disaster. Not a single slave heeded Brown's summons, and Brown and his men found themselves surrounded in the fire engine house, first by armed townspeople and then by United States Marines under the command of U.S. Army Lieutenant Colonel Robert E. Lee. 10 of Brown's men, including 2 of his sons, were killed. Aaron Stevens was shot several times but lived. Captured and tried, the surviving men all received a sentence of death, and Brown was hanged on December 2nd. Standing in a crowd of 1,500 to watch the execution was a young actor named John Wilkes Booth, who conceded that Brown was a brave old man. Aaron Stevens' hanging did not take place until 3 months later. On March 13, 1860, Stevens, unrepentant and ready to die, wrote a final letter to his brother from the Charlestown jail. My ever dear brother, I sit down for the last time without doubt to communicate a few thoughts to thee. I am in excellent health and very happy. Sister Lydia is with me, and she is as brave as ever. I was very glad to see her. It is now over 9 years since I last saw her. It does not seem so long how fast the time flies. I should like to see you, my dear brother, very much, but shall have to wait until we meet in the spirit world. What joy it will give me to meet you and all other kind friends there. I hope, dear brother, you will investigate the spiritual theory, for it is such pleasure to know that we shall all meet sooner or later in the spirit land than mere belief. It has been very consoling to me during these trying times. I hope you will be one of those lovers of truth and right, and help redeem the world from sin and oppression of all kinds. And as you love yourself, as you love man, as you love woman, as you love God, work with your head, heart, and hands for the happiness of yourself and all the world. Be careful and not think too much of self. This is one great thing we should all conquer. Give my love to your wife and little one, and say farewell. Farewell, my dear brother. We meet again beyond the tomb. God bless you and yours. A.D. Stevens. The third letter I want to read is about PFC James Dashner. In World War II, just after midnight on June 6, 1944, 23,000 paratroopers, comprised mostly of American 82nd and 101st Airborne Divisions, were dropped throughout the French countryside. Fooled as they may have been by the amphibious landings at Normandy, the Germans were thoroughly prepared inland. Fields were flooded so that paratroopers would be drowned upon landing. Many were. Strategically placed machine gunners shot men to pieces as they helplessly floated to earth. Widely scattered and separated from their units, which made them easier to kill or capture, the surviving U.S. troops rallied as best they could and seized key bridges and crossroads against tremendous odds. PFC James W. Dashner, with the 101st Airborne, staved off approaching German soldiers with a machine gun before a shell blew him apart. His cousin, PFC Charles McAllister, along with the 101st, liberated a German bicycle and rode around trying to find Dashner, not realizing he was already dead. After learning what happened from an eyewitness, McAllister wrote to Dashner's mother with the terrible news. My dearest aunt, I suppose this is the first time I have ever written to you, Aunt Mima. I have always been able to maintain the closest contact through Mom, and it never seemed necessary. I am sorry that this first letter must be written under such a sad circumstance, but I hope we may come to know each other better through future correspondence, and that we may be able to comfort each other in some way. At a time like this, it's hard for anyone, especially one who isn't good at words such as I, to say anything that might be of comfort to someone who has suffered a great loss like you have. But since I can at least tell you how James met his death, I feel that it might be of some comfort to you. When Jim came to see me a few weeks before the invasion, I knew instinctively when I first saw him that I would like him. First of all, his wonderful physique and handsome features command respect, and once you talked with him, his honest ways and great personality made you like him very much. We were friends from the start. We had a pleasant afternoon of talking of home and loved ones, and when I walked out on the road with him, where he flagged a truck going toward his camp, we shook hands and wished each other luck, and I thought as I watched him running to catch his truck, what a great guy. That was the last time I saw him. I knew he jumped in France because he is in the same division as I am, and I hoped to meet him there. His regiment was close by all the time, but there was no time to try to get together until the 10th day when I located his company and went over to see about him. I found his platoon, and it only took a glance around to prove to me Jim wasn't there. I hoped for the best, but dreaded to ask about him. By chance, I approached a former very close friend of his who was with him at the time, and when he told me what happened, it was quite a blow. By this time, I had lost many friends and thought I had become hardened to it, but this was different. Jim was part of the family, the same blood as mine, and that was different. But the battlefield is no place to grieve, so I made an effort to control my feelings and asked the fellow to tell me the details. This is what he told me. Jim's section leader had been killed, and Jim was in charge, so he took over the machine gun himself. His platoon was set out on a flank and ran into plenty trouble. The enemy had them surrounded on 3 sides and had them pinned down with fire. Jim took the machine gun and crawled forward to a good position and set up the gun and began firing. He was in a spot and was doing plenty of good, so the Heinies started concentrating all their efforts on him. They were trying to get him with a mortar. His platoon leader saw they were getting close and yelled to Jim that he'd better get out of there. The boys in the platoon said it was possible Jim didn't hear, as they had never known him to refuse to obey an order, but his friends seemed to think he was just mad and was doing so much good at the time he didn't want to move. So he stayed right there and fired until his gun was red hot. Then they got zeroed in on him and landed a mortar shell right on top of him. He died instantly, but his hand was still clutching the trigger. As a result of his continued fire, the platoon was able to advance on their objective. On the way back to my outfit, I let myself go and cried like a baby, but I wasn't ashamed of it. When his son gets old enough, tell him how his father died and his son's son, for our family must never forget him. Let's try to replace grief with a pride in the way he died and the things he died for, as that is the way Jim would want it. Yes, his outfit has lost a great soldier, his buddies have lost a great friend, but you have lost a son. God has not left us without consolation. We know that all is done in fulfillment of God's will, and that not even a sparrow falls that he does not know. And though we are inclined to ask the reason why, who are we to question his will? He has promised that we shall all one day be together again, and there find happiness that shall never end, where there is no sorrow, tears, nor grief. Jim is there tonight under God's loving care. He will never again have to experience the horrors of battle. I can hear him saying, "Don't grieve for me. I'm happy here, and when we meet again, we will never be separated." I talked to Jim, Aunt Mima. He was ready to go, I know. No one knows how heavy your heart is tonight, but if I could in some small way help to take his place, I would like to be your son. I know that I could never fill his place in your heart, just as no one could take the place of my mother if God should see fit to take her away, but we can be a comfort to each other. I want you to let Jim's wife and baby know if there is any way in which I might ever help them, for them not to hesitate to call on me. There is nothing I wouldn't do for them for Jim's sake. Give my love and sympathy to them and Martha and his brothers. With all my love, Charles. I hope these three testimonies of sacrifice and faith inspire us on this Memorial Day weekend. Amen.